you're not just nurturing the clients, but you're also nurturing the caregivers.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Purpose-Driven Investment Podcast. I'm your host, Shinyi Telscher. This is a podcast where we talk about strategy, learn from each other, and invest in something that matters. So today I have my dear friend, Brittani Garner, join us today. How are we doing, Brittani?
I'm so good. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that we get to chat together. But this time, I really appreciate you coming on. You are currently based in Missouri, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Right. And it was so interesting to me because when I first started doing real estate investing, a lot of people talking about co-living, a lot of cat split. You hear about that a lot. So you just basically randomly put a whole bunch of people in the same room. Each one of them have their own individual room. They might share a bath or they may not. So there's a lot of different model, but the model of how you do business is really interesting and very exciting to me when I first heard about it. So before everybody would dive into it, I'm going to have you introduce yourself, where you're from, and before we dive into this special topic today.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I have 16 years of real estate experience before the healthcare operation, commercial real estate background with development, lending, redevelopment, a lot of infill lots. I started with a commercial brokerage and kind of learned the ropes of what commercial development looks like in mixed use developments, a little bit of the tax credit projects, kind of cut my teeth, and then went out to start a brokerage on my own. About 7 years ago, I entertained the idea of doing some assisted living concepts with the real estate tied to it in the Southern California market. It was really trendy in the mid-teens, and I thought it would be appropriate to pair my real estate background with an operator, nurse practitioner, or some sort of clinician. And so I started learning the ropes there. I actually pursued the administrator license and got that so I could understand the model. Someone just dropped this breadcrumb on me. They said, if anybody in this administrator class is interested in the developmental disability space, my son has Down syndrome and there's a huge demand for that. So she was just kind of putting that out there, looked into it.
Get your ears perked up.
What kind of demand? And I didn't even leave with it that day. In fact, I left, started developing my marketing plan, and it was all geared towards private pay customers. So we're talking affluent families that can afford $8,000 to $20,000 monthly room and board costs for the care plus the housing. And being a startup company competing with private equity in that market, it just seemed like it was nearly impossible. And so I pivoted to what this lady mentioned, which was, hey, there might be an opportunity. There's a huge demand. It's all government funded. And so within 30 to 60 days, we started the application process to become a licensed Medicaid operator. I quickly ran the numbers, compared the Missouri reimbursement rates for Medicaid versus California reimbursement rates, very similar. The cost of living is tremendously lower in Missouri, and the margins just made sense. So I applied for a license in Missouri, which was my home state, and thought I was going to have operators in place to run the business, and I would just kind of consult and own the business from afar. And fast forward 7 years later, I'm knee deep in operations and I love it, but that wasn't the original plan.
That was such a good condense of your journey. I think you touched on a lot of good things where I wanted to kind of unwrap a little bit, right? So you initially wanted to do assisted living. It sounds like because you went into that, it sounds like a very mission-driven mission that you believe in. I believe your wife also have a medical background, right? And she's a nurse, I remember. So maybe that's what pumped you into that space, right? In the beginning.
So she was a nurse practitioner with the VA, and she's been a nurse her entire career. My mother was a private duty caregiver, and I've kind of spent the last 20 or 30 years just exposed to what families need from a private care perspective. I don't know, I think it's just in us to be natural caregivers and lean towards more hospitality and quality versus the standardized system of care, which is nursing home life. And so I knew there was a better way to deliver that. I had the exposure through my mother and of course through my wife, and felt confident about what good looks like in that space.
I see. And then you mentioned about, for some reason, when you dive into this business, you're trying to crunch the number, it doesn't work out. I think the cost of entry is a little bit higher in California, rightfully so, because we know everybody trying to start a business in California is very expensive. So you decide to move back to your hometown in Missouri. But in between, right, you mentioned about the cost of entry and you mentioned about private equity. Kind of explain that, paint that picture for us, that the really well-run facility by private equity versus the personally well-run small facility. What does that look like and why each one has its own niche?
Yeah. It's a great question. And a lot of times I don't want to be biased. So I will say not all situations are equal, but historically, operations that get taken over by private equity are totally focused on the bottom
Profit.
dollar, right? And they lose the person-centeredness, especially in care situations, right? And so just from the sheer size, you lose touch with how to deal with people. It's a human service business, and that doesn't mean just your customers. It also means the care team because they need a lot of support. So it's really to do well and to sustain, you can just go for a volume and you can go for, we're going to take over every operation. We're going to have massive facilities. You're just a number. And, it's a revolving door of caregivers and they burn through them. And it furthers the stigma of, I don't want my parents in a place like that because they never know what caregiver they're going to have. They treat them like crap. They don't provide good food or quality housing. So all of those things that people fear for a reason when you get taken over by a corporation versus a mom and pop operation.
Right. I can totally see that. It's about the bottom line, right? It's like how many room I can fill as fast as I can.
And on the flip side of that, you do have some mom and pop operations that are just outside of their scope. And so they kind of miss the mark too. And we really appreciate being that quality middle ground. But it's hard to compete with private equity. As someone who doesn't have the experience and doesn't have the bankroll to go in and say, I'm going to buy up all these facilities, you're really just out there handing out flyers saying, trust us, we can do right by your family members, take a chance on us and give us a check for $20,000 a month. That doesn't really go over well.
Yeah, so I imagine in the beginning, try to build out that reputation. It's a little bit climb. You have to build out a reputation and establish your clientele, your market. We want to explain to people why I brought you on. So a lot of people talk about assisted living, co-living, but what is IDD? Let's walk us into that. What is IDD? This is such a special niche. And then it's a clientele that just, they could need this type of service for the rest of their life, not just transitionally. So what is IDD?
Yeah, so IDD is an acronym. It's usually listed as I/D or I/DD for intellectual and developmental disabilities. That is a clinical term for someone who may be neurodivergent. So think autism, Down syndrome, ADHD, OCD, oppositional defiant disorder. There's a lot of neurological diagnosis differences, like a different way of your brain working, but there's also the developmental side, which is maybe a genetic difference from birth or something that impacted your development before the age of 22 is kind of the benchmark for Missouri. Now, another subsegment of that is the traumatic brain injury. So even if you're not in the development stage of life, let's say you have an accident at age 50 and you've got TBI, you still are kind of encompassed in that pool of the population.
Right. And would you say this kind of clientele, they usually need a little bit more in lifetime support? And maybe explain to us what kind of support they will need in the home setting. And I know some people, a lot of parents, right, they have kids like that. They will try to care for them for the rest of their life. But on the flip side, me working, as a healthcare professional working in a hospital, it could also create a really heavy toll on the parents. Sometimes they need a break, right? Yeah. So maybe explain to us like what kind of IDD facility could provide any sort of services for these families.
Yeah. So there's the most comprehensive type of service would be like a residential service where someone with IDD moves into an agency's home or an agency controlled home and receives up to 24-hour care 7 days a week. That could be one-on-one care, or it could be 1 to 2, 1 to 3, meaning 3 people sharing a home with a caregiver on site. Typically, those are shift workers, so 3 shifts a day, different people coming in and out of your home. There's also the group home model where you've got maybe 10 or 20 people in a home and it's more institutionalized, or it could be the single family home. So that's most comprehensive, the residential component, but you also have community-based supports, which are day programs, not adult daycares, right? Because you're not talking about seniors, but you're talking about active people under the age of 64 typically that want the social development, the recreational. I mean, you're still sometimes developing those skills and fostering those relationships. There's social, recreational, and skill development components of a day program.
Is this some sort of sensory kind of stimulation?
Yeah, for us, we have a younger population, so they are geared more towards lots of activities, lots of community outings, skill development, kind of curriculum-based activities. Some day programs are focused on like physical development or casual, relaxed. So they're all different vibes.
Gotcha. I think I've probably seen them out in the outing. Like sometimes I see a group of people out doing like movie night. I've seen them have like bowling night. Sometimes they go to like the zoo. You can see like there's usually a counselor or maybe like a second helper and leading with about a group of 10. Maybe that's what you're talking about, right?
Yep, that's exactly right. Yeah.
I see. So for your home, how many houses that you're currently own and operated right now in Missouri?
We operate 15 homes right now, and we have 3 licensed day programs with a 4th like pending approval.
So for the day program, is it operating sort of like a daycare but for IDD client?
Yes.
Is that right?
And we carefully say, you know, when we're talking amongst each other, it's a daycare-like place, but words carry weight, right? So we make sure that no young adult feels like they're going to a daycare.
I see. Yeah, daycare like. So I imagine these family probably drop their loved one in the day program and then maybe pick them up on the way home.
Yes, or we can provide transportation.
I see. How about, do you have any client that's like 24/7 support? I imagine these kind of time, maybe wheelchair bound or need some sort of food, meal planning.
So some of our residential clients that are living in our single family homes, they share a home with someone else that's receiving support. They typically have a house manager that kind of coordinates life for them. They coordinate medical appointments and food and personal errands. For our agency specifically, we like to really advocate for a productive day. So if someone were to move into one of our homes or they want to move into one of our homes, we want to ensure that they are either A, going to our day program to get stimulation and engage with peers, or they're pursuing something like a vocational track. So supported employment, pre-vocational skills, work, pursuing work or entrepreneurship in some sort of way. Because again, a productive day leads to a better quality of life. And for us, we kind of wrap those services together to make a whole person approach, so to speak.
Right. I love that because imagine you provide opportunity for them to be trained. And I'm thinking there might be some job opportunity perspective they can be integrated into the society as well to bring more meaningful work. Is that also part of the planning?
That is absolutely right. So we are considered like the black sheep of our market, I feel like. We push the envelope a little bit on like pushing the status quo, getting you out of what you would typically see for someone with developmental disabilities. There's another stigma, you know, assuming that you can't work because you don't have the skill set, or you can only work in fast food, you know, wiping down tables. But really, with a job coach and the right support, the options are limitless. And we spend a lot of time educating employers on why this would make sense for your organization. They're also facing, you know, staffing shortages and
turnover.
And you've got someone who's got a job coach who's going to help make modifications and accommodations for this person. And statistically, they're more committed to the routine and showing up every day than your typical mainstream worker.
Right. And I've noticed that, I'll give you an example. I recently went grocery shopping. Wegman is a very well-known grocery chain in my area. I remember I was shopping. I was picking up this loaf of bread, and the person behind the counter, I can just tell, you know, he's on the spectrum, but he was so polite. He was literally, as soon as I pick up the loaf of bread, he was like, "Ma'am, would you need your bread cut? Can I help you with anything?" And he was so delightful, and he was always with a smile, and he's just so willing to help. And I hand my loaf of bread to him. He's like, you can tell he went through that step by step in his mind, like without keeping the beat. He just like, okay, how thick you want it to cut, and like doing this and that, and he just did wonderful job and handed it back to me. I was like, wow, this is like the best customer support compared to any other servicer. I was blown away. I'm like, wow, this is perfect. This is perfect for providing good opportunity to give back to the community.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the company gets some sort of tax incentive as well when they do that, when they work with a nonprofit, right?
So, so there are work opportunity tax credits for people to bring new workforce in, or maybe someone like a veteran returning to the workforce. Like there are tax credits, but even if you're not getting the tax credit, statistically basically like someone with a developmental disability, you're doing more than just hiring a worker. The sense of pride that that guy had and the fact that you're empowering him and you're contributing to put him to work, I mean, it's incredible.
And I'm sure it will be such a joy for his family to look at how he has progressed. So I can see why you love this industry. I can see why you thrive in your market. If I have to ask you, like, why you decide to jump into the industry and continue to do so, can you share a couple of amazing stories with me? I'm sure you have some. Like, maybe give us the one or two, the best one that kind of propel you to do
we could talk for 8 hours and I still would not have enough. This morning I shared like 5 that came to mind, and I said, I don't know that there's anyone in our company that we serve that doesn't have an incredible progression, achievements that they've achieved. To share just a couple, there was a young woman who was living in a rural community, maybe 40 miles from our hub where our market is, which is Columbia, Missouri. Columbia is like a college town. It's an autism-friendly city, so it has been nationally recognized for that. A great community full of resources and open-minded, like the right kind of people to support our population. So she's 40 miles outside of this area. She has trouble finding support staff. She lives independently, but she's kind of a product of the system. Her parents were severely disabled intellectually. She was abused. She grew up always being told she can't do something, right? It's just like the total caged mindset. Grew up in a group home when her parents died young. Almost became more helpful than the staff that they had there because she was a lot more independent than some of the people that were living with her peers in the group home. And so we started providing community-based supports for her in this rural community because it's kind of in our radius. And I had some conversations with her and I said, hey, why don't you just move to Columbia? Because I've heard you talk about it. You seem to love it. And really it was just a limiting mindset, right? She said, my guardian would never let me do that. It was a public administrator guardian.
Because the parents have passed away, right? Yeah. So it's a public assigned guardian.
It's public assigned, Like, so basically you're a ward of the court then. But she's like an adult and she's capable and just pursue whatever it is you want. You're in control. Even though there's a legal guardian, you're still in control of your life and your decisions. That's your human right.
Correct. It's not that conservator was what I understand is there's guardians, there's conservator, different degree of control. Yeah.
Yep. And this one, in this case, it was like a unnecessary flexing of the power. No real logical reason to keep this person in this community if they don't want to be there. But fast forward, she's living on her own in her own place. She has taken over her own guardianship, so she's in control of her life fully. She's her own financial payee through her Social Security. She just got her driver's permit with our help.
Whoa.
And she is also an employee at Avant. So she is a mentor assistant. So she's guiding other people with developmental disabilities, leading activities, leading outings, kind of modeling that behavior. And it's all with our support. So, I mean, I get messages from her all the time, like, you have no idea how grateful I am. I just love being here. I mean, her life is like 180 different from where it was a year ago. So she just hit her 1-year mark with the company. She's thriving. She's a consistent worker. Her peers love her. She still participates as a customer in some of our services, but she's also an employee. And so she's like the poster child, if you would, of what inclusion looks like for someone with developmental disabilities.
And when you give people enough support and confidence and just lay out the path, they just walk and flourish.
Yeah.
Wow, such a wonderful story. So now she's your full-time employee. I imagine best employee.
She's incredible. Everything in her life has 10 times improved.
180.
Like, lost weight. She's got off of some of her medications. She's happy in her home. She's got a great group of friends. I mean, she couldn't be doing any better.
Well, let's dive into, I know it's such a great story, but let's help our audience understand, like, I'm sure running this type of service is not exactly easy, right? What does the setup look like and what kind of day-to-day that you have to juggle and manage? And let's start with that, and then we can then dive into your staffing structure, because how to run a well-run houses and a business like that.
It's so complex because everything we do is surrounding humans, right? That's the first layer. As I mentioned earlier, you're not just nurturing the clients, but you're also nurturing the caregivers or the mentors that require such a huge bandwidth, like to juggle so many different personalities and so many support needs. To be a mentor in our community, it's very taxing. And because we set the bar high, we expect our mentors to truly dive into things that most people avoid. Like, don't be afraid to have hard conversations. Don't be afraid to set hard boundaries and demand respect from each other and share your vulnerable parts and be a model for someone. Like, teach someone how to raise their emotional IQ. So I think the hardest part as a leader and an operator in that business is is dealing with all the drama, so to speak, right? The emotions, the feeling, the support needs, the communication differences and styles, and then just bringing structure to that, because you have to tread that line lightly of people are human. They need space and they need grace, but they also need structure if you're running an operation and you've got to work with limited funds to make the organization thrive, right? We're at a disadvantage in the fact that we can't set our price. So even though our quality of care might be higher, we don't go up on our price. We have the same reimbursement rates as our competitor. So
is your payees or typically the government funded subsidy? What does the payment structure look like?
Yeah, so we're all contracted as a contractor through the Department of Mental Health, and each state, it might be the Department of Social Services, the Department of Mental Health, whatever that governing body is, but it's also the state Medicaid level. The Department of Social Services pays us as Medicaid, and again, our reimbursement rates are set, the fiscal year runs, and sometimes those rates go up, sometimes they go down. Like, it kind of depends on who's in office, really. It is unfortunately political tied, but again, that's a pro and a con for us. So trying to make the most of that reimbursement, also having the security of guaranteed government money or close to guaranteed government money is a pro.
I imagine it's a juggling act, right? You look at how much money coming every month that's set by the government, but you also, on the other flip side, I need to make sure my business produce and also provide quality care with the best staff I can hire to provide the best service. So it's not easy. It's not as easy as people think. Do you have any private client, like private pay client at all, or is it all government?
We have had them in the past, but they're very short term. So if we have a private pay client, we match the Medicaid rates. Typically, that's just in the interim until my Medicaid gets approved, or in the interim until we move into the next phase. But it's typically not sustainable from a family.
I imagine it's not like a couple hundred, it's a all day kind of care, 24/7. Would you say it's similar to assisted living kind of payment structure?
I never got into that, but I mean, sometimes the contracts, depending on their support needs, can be $300,000 or $400,000 a year. And sometimes it could be $50,000 a year. I mean, it really depends on their support needs, but it is not affordable for most families.
That's why I think the government have to subsidize the services. Any add-on service at all to supplement the income? Like, for example, like the outing, like anything like additional?
I think the nonprofit players in this space, because there are for-profit government contractors and nonprofit, we happen to have both. We happen to have the Medicaid business, which is for-profit, and then we have a Work with Purpose, which is our work training nonprofit. So sometimes those overlap. We support each other. We partner on some activities. I think nonprofit organizations can maybe stretch their dollar further if they get charitable contributions and donations from the community. For-profit company is not doing that. So you really have to be lean with your operations if you're a for-profit player.
Is it anybody who wants to start a service, they have to take an administrator license at all to get in?
They have to work for an agency or get a license. So if you want to get into the space, it would probably be in your best interest to partner with an agency, or at least take a seat and get a salary and learn the ropes.
Right, like an internship or something like that. I've started seeing some nonprofit foundation offering that for people who are going through some sort of internship. Yeah. You also shared with me about kind of branch out your business a little bit. You mentioned about the foster aspect kind of business. You want to talk about that a little bit? How that came out?
Sure. So that really just started in the last 12 months as a response to the need. The margins are shrinking, right? The cuts are there with the government resources, and the demand from the customer side is growing, right? There's more kids year over year aging out of foster care, more and more diagnoses with autism. And so the demand is just creeping up, and really the providers are just finding the balance. And so we want to meet the needs of those kids that are aging out of foster care, take them through our work training program, and hopefully use that same concept of folding you into our community however you see fit. So foster kid knows firsthand what it's like to live with an outside family, outside your biological family. They know exactly what paid supports is all about. They typically, somewhere between 20 and 30% of foster kids have IDD of some sort. And so, they're used to someone coordinating their medical care, and they're used to going to therapy, and they're searching for that sense of belonging. And it's probably the closest industry that overlaps the most with IDD. So it made sense for us to start branching into that as a diversification strategy to also help further the mission.
Right. Or I would think it's like an expanded service to capture the client that will be need to fall into your service, or with a little bit of support. Maybe when they age out of foster care, right? Is it when they turn 21?
There's a transitional, so it's 18, but somewhere in that transitional age of like 18 to up to 25, you're in this label of transitional aged youth. And there are some grants available for like housing for them. If you're an employer and you hire someone, there's some educational and work opportunities. But yeah, generally, if you're neurotypical and you don't have IDD, but you're just a foster kid that has aged out of the system, we'd love for you to come in, have a job opportunity, guide some other people on how to live their best life, and then you can also thrive and get full-time competitive employment and have your own autonomy.
I'm so impressed what you've done so far. Have you thought about branching your business at all, or are you going to stay in town?
Yeah, so for a long time, I thought we haven't even skimmed the surface in Missouri. There is tons of demand, more demand than we could ever meet, but we've got quite a few people that have come to us and want to learn the operation. Last quarter, we recently added a new service line, which is remote supports. And so now we can design smart homes with remote support provided to people who want more autonomy, who need independence, but need someone within reach, but not hovering in their home, So that's a new service line. And because of that addition, now it's kind of like just open this entire can of worms. Like we've got people asking for remote supports in Oregon and Pennsylvania. And so we went from, we'll just stick to Missouri to now we're like nationally coordinating everything.
So I'm sure that people, once they learn about your very successful model, they want to learn how you do it and learn from you and partner together. So if people wanted to reach out to you, it sounds like you're open to that kind of idea to branch out and provide your infrastructure to others stay. What would be the best way to contact you?
Yeah, so I'm not big into social media. My head is usually down. You can email me because I'm of the age that, email is my friend.
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
I'm on
or old-fashioned pick up the phone call, but I'm sure you're too busy for that.
Me, text me, whatever. Email me. I might have a TikTok profile. I don't know. Instagram is a good way if you're like looking at our business page or my personal page. It's at Brittani Builds, or just a good old-fashioned email or phone call works just fine.
Well, I'm so glad we get to chat today, and I'm so appreciative of you coming up to share your wisdom running into this space and accidentally, but now thriving. So I'm so proud of you, and thank you. And I'm so happy to call you as my friend. Thank you for coming up today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.